Hello and welcome to another episode of Creating Cultures at Outperform. I'm Frank Wander, the CEO of PeopleProductive, and I'm here with my favorite and only co-host, Terri Mays.
I'm the best
How you
one,
doing?
huh? The best co-host you've ever had on the
That's
show.
right. Terry's amazing. I mean, I recommend her as anybody's co-host. She's fabulous.
But thank you.
Yeah, she's
Feeling
great. And
so
she is an expert on the human side of business, no question about it. I hope you've been watching our shows recently. We're here every Wednesday at 3 o'clock. It's a live show. Feel free to join us. We've been covering different human factors and things that you really need to know in this new world of work where people are the most important tool in every company. So, we're going to talk about better brainstorming today. What does the science say about brainstorming and creativity? What gets in the way of people actually really being effective at this? We're going to do this pretty quickly. We'll end with a couple of things you can do to overcome many of these. But brainstorming's absolutely vital. You've got to be able to get people together, and we're not going to spend time on the underlying culture, which, we're really talking about psychological safety, candor, creative abrasion, and things that should be operating in your culture if you want to be innovative. We're going to get into the cognitive psychology and what things tend to get in the way when people are in a room discussing stuff. So, without further ado, why don't we just get right into this, Tara? Let's talk about things that cause inertia in meetings, like anchoring bias. People hear a piece of information and they value that more than they do the information that comes after it. So if somebody has an idea and they present it, people start to hang on to that idea. It's the first thing they touch, the first thing they know, and they'll start to judge new ideas against it and may overweight this first thing that they heard or encountered. And I think people running these meetings have to be aware of this anchoring bias. Why don't you grab an idea here? What do you think?
Yeah, I think another good one is that whole idea of loss aversion. So the good doesn't outweigh the loss to the person that's holding on to the thing that they don't want to let go of. So they don't want to lose anything. Remember, we're hardwired for that. We
Mhm.
don't want to lose anything, but the fear of not having enough or not being able to gain something great, that fear overrides. And so we end up holding on to things that we probably should let go of. But because of that fear of loss, we don't want to let go of it. And we forget about all the possibility of the gains, all the possibility of the things that we can get out of this. This might actually be better. We find this a lot in the area of applications when it's time to sunset an application that people are familiar with. They don't want to let go of that application because they know it and they don't want to learn something new, even though the new system may be 10 times better than the one they're currently using. You find that people will kick against it or they don't want to support the implementation
Oh,
because they're
yeah.
so used to and comfortable with the system that they have.
That's right. They'll start to poo-poo ideas that may threaten that. Interesting. I've seen it too. And then
Yes.
you get this notion of, people hanging on to things because so much money was invested in it.
Hmm.
And it's similar to loss aversion, I guess, but I've seen this in action many times in companies. It's called the sunk cost fallacy. And there's so much money invested. Look how good it is. We could never get rid of it. And people poo-poo ideas that threaten that too, because they've got
Yeah.
to hang on to it.
Yeah. Or they dismiss that idea because they just automatically say, oh, it's too difficult. We
Oh,
can't do that. It's too hard. We don't want to invest that time and energy. They just kind of quickly dismiss the idea. A lot of times this happens when you find people that aren't as familiar with the new suggestion. So it may be a new area of technology or some new tool that people can use, but they're not familiar with it. And so instead of taking the time to learn about it and become more familiar, or at least trust the person that's bringing the idea to the table, they just kind of dismiss it because they don't want to dig into that and learn something new. They don't want to, they just want to automatically say, we can't do it. And they want to
how
move
many
on.
times have we seen that, right? Oh, that's too difficult. Forget about
Right.
it.
Right. It's just too hard. We just
Yeah.
can't do that. We
I
can't.
won't share the details, but that just happened to me recently at a meeting I was at, and it was interesting. Exact same thing.
Yeah.
That's not feasible. We'd never be able to do that.
Yeah. Usually that quick dismissal is an indication of fear because people don't want to dig into it. They don't want to learn. They don't want to say, I don't know what that is, or they don't feel vulnerable enough to really be honest and ask more questions and ask the person to explain it in a way that they can understand it.
Mhm.
It's a shame that in a lot of our organizations, people don't feel comfortable enough to be transparent. They don't feel comfortable enough to say, I don't know, or
Yep.
can
That's
you
a big
help
one.
me? Can you help me understand? Those terms are not terms you hear frequently in a meeting, but instead you'll see this bias show itself.
Yeah.
And people play it out that way. But really, the underlying thing is a lack of vulnerability in the organization.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have a vulnerable culture, and that's a big deal, right? Companies should
Right.
really be building cultures where all these different human factors are not expressing themselves, right? These negative biases and things that come up when people get together to do things. Another area we could talk about, Tara, is where, there's pressure to really get something done. Let's take action. Something happened in the market. They've got to respond. What have you seen in those cases when that tends to come up?
Yeah, I think this idea of excessive optimism. So
Mhm.
they're overly optimistic about the outcomes. We just think that
Mhm.
people are going to grab onto it and they're going to run with it. And most of the time, that's not the case. People tend to want to hold on to what they know, and they don't want to make new decisions. They don't want to go out and take risks. A lot of
Yep.
people don't anyway. So you have to keep that in mind, that this will hinder your creativity if people are too overly optimistic and they think about, things are just going to go well all the time. If you don't spend some time thinking about, well, what if it doesn't go well? It's going to be a challenge if you get to a situation and things are not going well. And now you've spent all of your time and energy thinking about people embracing and accepting the change.
Oh, yeah, it's come on, we gotta get something done. That is a great idea. Let's go with it. And poo-poo all the detractors who say, wait a minute, let's take a step back here. Oh, come on, you're just trying to slow us down. Stop it.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
you're really only seeing things from one side.
yeah.
So being overly optimistic about it, you do want to have some optimism and enthusiasm about whatever it is.
Ah,
You can't be so optimistic and not consider the other side of that, the what if they don't.
well, another side of that coin, perhaps, is this notion of people being overconfident, right? So they need to take action, and they start overestimating their ability to actually get things done, and they start also not looking at the risks.
Right.
Not just we got to get it done, let's go, but this underlying, we can do it, come on, overconfidence, which I think is a real risk when people are considering different options and things to do.
Yeah. And there's this whole level of balance that needs to come in. And sometimes we overestimate how much we can accomplish. I am notorious for this, overestimating how much I
Yeah,
can do in a set period of time. So I've only got 15 minutes or 10 minutes, and I want to try to do 30 things in those 10 minutes, but I really don't have enough time. But I'm so confident. Oh, yeah, I can do it. I can do it. And
yeah,
then I realize you can't do it. That's too many things. So I'm trying to teach myself how
yeah,
to come out of this space of being so overly confident that I don't even realize that I can't complete all the things that I'm trying to complete in this time frame. So being a little bit more realistic about what can be done and what can't be done within a particular time frame is huge. It
right,
has a big impact on people that you're leading, because if you're constantly overestimating their ability to get something done and you don't consider, the role of chance,
yeah,
there's always going to be something that happens that you didn't think of, something that comes up that nobody was expecting. All of those things happen. That's just the
yeah,
nature of the beast. So you have to leave in some padded time, leave in some margin so that you can actually respond to those things that just kind of pop up out of the blue.
yeah. But Tara, I'm disappointed because I did think you were a superhero and you could do 20 things at once. You know?
Well, I can't. I'm so sorry. And I'm learning that the hard way.
And then, you get to this other area where it's pattern recognition biases, they're called, where people misinterpret a conceptual relationship because of perceived patterns. So I know you and I have spoken about this in the past. Maybe we could spend a minute on this one.
Yeah.
Some people give much more weight to something positive that happened in the past, and they cease this idea and how it relates to this thing in the past was very positive, and they start to overweight that and immediately say, hey, yeah, this could be really good, let's go with that. That whole notion of saliency or overweighting things.
Yeah. Or that other end of it where they're using these analogies to compare to the current situation,
Yeah.
but they really are not great analogies. They really don't directly compare to what the current situation is.
Yep.
When you start doing that, you base your analogy on something false that doesn't really compare. And so really it's not apples to apples. You've really got to make sure that you're not comparing apples to oranges and expecting the outcome of oranges when you've got apples. So you really do have to be careful about that and make sure that you're comparing situations that really are similar so that you can get your confidence and make decisions that are good decisions based on the facts and not just these kind of false feelings that you've developed because you used an analogy that didn't really apply.
Yeah, people do that, we've all seen that, and some people are really good at it. That's why they're so persuasive. You also
Yes.
get the situation of confirmation bias, where people who just like the idea and in favor of it, they immediately embrace and give huge credit to ideas that support what they're thinking. And we've talked about confirmation bias in other shows. It shows up all the time. Oh, I believe that, and sure, look, this is true. And they start, bringing up things that just favor it, and they don't bring up the negatives. And of
Yeah.
course, that is a real risk, because that pattern, you're seeing that pattern and you're saying this is a good idea when in fact maybe it isn't.
That's right.
And then you get in this area of kind of the social bias that creeps into this thing when people start to debate things. One we talked about just a couple of weeks ago, this false consensus.
Hmm.
Which is people should watch that show. There's a lot of research on this where people automatically believe that many more people think like them than actually do. And they've proven this with scientific research. A couple of weeks ago, you'll see that show, folks, if you want to watch it. But that creeps in here, that whole notion of, hey, everybody believes this, which is not the case.
Right. And the other thing we see too is, based on the person that's presenting, you may have a bias towards that person. So you tend to agree with that person versus actually hearing the idea and evaluating the idea based on the information that's being presented. So based on the facts, you're evaluating that idea based on the person that's presenting. This happens a lot in juries, where the
Yeah,
person,
you're right. Jury selection. Oh my
yeah,
God.
yeah, the person that's making the presentation, if people tend to like the lawyer that's making the
Mhm.
presentation, then you tend to believe what they're saying, which in turn makes you more lenient on the person or you're more biased towards the person that they're representing. And that also plays itself out with dominant view, where people, tend to just go with whatever the senior leaders say.
Oh boy, yeah. Hop
You
on the
know,
bandwagon,
yeah,
so
you're
and so
just
says
right
you're
on.
doing it. Let's go.
That's right,
Yeah,
that's right. So it's all about that personality versus the actual
yeah.
facts or the information that's being presented.
These are all very important things that happen all the time in companies and meetings when ideas are being considered. And
Yeah,
that's why this episode is called Better Brainstorming. You want to be creative, you should be aware of all these cognitive biases that are out there.
that's right.
And then, there's this kind of the whole notion of how self-interest creeps into this, where people start to promote ideas that are in their self-interest as opposed to being completely unbiased about what's happening. And you see that as well.
Yeah,
Somebody sees a particular thing that if the company does it, wow, they're going to learn a lot or they're going to gain a lot from it. So they start to go, yeah, that's the best idea by far.
Yeah.
And it's not sincere.
Or, people are going to get a big bonus if we implement this system on time. So everybody gets on board with implementing the system, even though they know it's full of flaws. I've seen that happen many times where there are financial incentives to complete a project on
Yeah.
time or to deliver certain functions and features by a certain deadline. And so we push forward, even though we probably should stop and reevaluate.
Yeah. And they've done a lot of research on things that you can do to have better brainstorming to work around this. And one of them is, anonymous brainstorming. There are tools that are out there like Mentimeter where people can submit ideas, silent voting where people can vote on ideas, but no one knows who voted what. So all of these cognitive biases start to get kind of hidden in the background and people don't know who's got, who has what opinion. They start to evaluate the information in front of them, not who presented it.
Right. We're starting to see some of this play itself out too with using tools like Mural, where
Mural.
you can post your ideas out there, and the pressure is taken off of the name of the person that's posting.
Mhm.
And it's got like these little animal faces that show at the bottom of the screen. We've started to use it. And I think it's pretty cool because you get
Yeah.
a chance to vote on the ideas and it really takes the name out of it. Most tools have just the name show up first. This tool doesn't. The name is there, but it's not the first thing you see.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives you that anonymity to be able to just share what you think and then have people vote on it and not feel the pressure to agree with certain people, or you can remain anonymous in terms of how you're voting as well as the people that are throwing out ideas. So it's really kind of cool.
That's really kind of cool. I mean, there's no question. If you're going to do better brainstorming, you should be aware of these cognitive social biases. You should use new tools that help you overcome some of these. These are real. It is human. You've got to understand these human factors if you want to run an organization that's going to outperform without burning people out, by the way, which is what PeopleProductive does.
That's right.
But yeah, very important. I think you should join us here every Wednesday at 3 o'clock. Follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on YouTube at the People Productive channel. The shows are good. This information is incredibly valuable in an era where people are the most important tool, and it is an age of disruption. So humans matter more than ever.
Yes, absolutely.
So see you next Wednesday.
All right. Bye for now.
Take care.